about making droids, and then I was hired, and then got me into working Force Awakens building R2s.
Absolutely. Well, those look incredible. And so you were building a lot of different droids, though.
Yeah, we didn't do R2 straight away. We built various droids. First of all, just smaller droids. So we did this, which is classed as a toolbox droid. This was something I built. It is moving around in the background. I think it's at Rebel Base, which is quite a bit of fun. Something Neil gave us to build. I did the mouse droids as well. I did them, so you'll see them whizzing around. And then Oliver did the upgrade to the mouse droid, which is what we've got here.
Yeah, so this is the Imperial Sentry droid, which was basically an evolution of a mouse droid 30 years on from Star Wars. And let's put the mic down.
Yeah, so this is the Imperial Sentry droid here. Where did we see this in the movie?
Yes, it is. It's on the Imperial base.
Right.
When Poe steals the TIE fighter.
Right.
And various other things, you'll see these flying back. People may have missed them, but watch it again, and there's plenty of them about.
The First Order Star Destroyer out in the background. Yeah, that's really cool. So this is like Mouse Droid 5.0, basically. This guy right here.
Indeed, yeah.
And is it pretty much the same principles in terms of its movement? Oh no, actually it seems to have a lot more. Oh yes.
So, yeah, this is classed as an Omni droid, so it goes in any direction. So wherever Oliver points the joystick, it shoots off in that direction and rotates in the spot as well. So it's quite fun to drive, but you don't always know which way is forward.
Do you ever crash into Captain Phasma on the set of The Force Awakens, or any First Order mishaps? No, perhaps?
Not really. There's always some mishaps. No.
Well, that's a good answer.
Changing the subject to one of the next images that has come up. Something else we worked on was the domes for the back of the X-Wings as well. So JJ, we used some designs that are already canon, but we also added a new design, the R0 dome, which is the black and white one you see there with the top hat popped up. And JJ liked it so much we built a couple of them, and the black and orange one appears in Poe's X-Wing just before BB-8 gets in. So that was something else that was quite nice to build.
Very, very cool. And there's R2.
So in total we built 4 R2s for Force Awakens. We had an inside one with the flat surfaces, an outside one with sort of 2-inch ground clearance for sort of sand. It was absolutely perfect. A sort of Kenny 2-legged droid that Josh did the pneumatics for, that sort of wobbled. And then another droid that had all panels that opened, so we only used in one shot.
You'll see from the opening photo of Oliver with all the droids and myself as well as this photo here. We did use other droids as well. The pink one, R2KT, which was made in America by a group of fans, which is quite an interesting story. But people Google, if you don't know the R2KT story, Google it. It's quite a heartwarming story. Yep. So that flew over from the US, which we used. And the other droids as well, we did use fan-built droids. So we got fans in on different days when we needed them, and they helped us out as well, which was really nice.
So a lot of these were, that was a great question, so a lot of these were pre-built. You didn't have to start from scratch on every single...
That's right, the R2s we built, all the R2s.
Right.
But if we wanted something different, we do try and get the other R2 builders involved if we can.
Great, yeah, there he is.
This is Henrik. Henrik works for the creatures department, and he painted most of the characters that you see in The Force Awakens that came through the Creatures Workshop. And this is him weathering R2, just so it doesn't look right pristine on camera, so he's just dirtying them up to make them look a bit more authentic and older on screen.
Is that a pretty long process, or does that happen pretty quickly in terms of the overall paint and look and the back and forth with the director and how much to weather in versus, I mean, it is a sequel, so many years later.
Yeah, it's sometimes we're asked to make it more weathered, other times not, and just before cameras were rolling, it was too dirty, so we were there with spirits trying to clean it down quickly to just tidy him up a little bit. But yeah, what we've done, he was quite happy with from day one, really.
And how many R2s total were there? So we see 3 here in this shot. How many were there total?
There's 4.
4 total.
Yeah, we did a 4th one which had doors opening and so on, which you've seen in this shot. But and that wasn't used. But these are the 3 that were mainly used.
Very cool. Now, R2D2 obviously been around in a lot of movies, including The Phantom Menace. Now, you actually worked on The Phantom Menace with R2. Isn't that
yeah,
right?
so, you know, quite a few years ago now, I was on Phantom Menace, and R2D2 was a bit of a hot potato. Who was going to build it, actually? Because it's notoriously difficult to get it to work on set, to get it to work on sand, and get through doorways. That's always really difficult. You don't want to be the guy who bumps into the doorway mid-shot. So it was a bit of a hot potato, and special effects had a go, I think props had a go, and in the end ILM made a really good R2D2. So I was working on that film, but I was keeping an eye on how R2 was built.
So you're working with Don Bees.
Yeah, with there were some reshoots in the UK, and Don Bees came over for those. I was his assistant. That was great. So I got to dress Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. I got to I had a little play on R2D2, and most importantly, I got to look inside because I was really intrigued to see how Don had done it. Because this was the R2 that was the holy grail of R2.
So certainly that knowledge served you very well coming into The Force Awakens, because you had a new challenge presented to you pretty early on.
Yeah, originally. So Neil Scanlon, who's the kind of crazed genius head of creature effects, it was all very secret. It wasn't really clear that he'd got the film, but he rang me up and said, Josh, I think I've got Star Wars. Could you come and can you think about how you would do R2D2? So I was a bit apprehensive, and it's going to be tricky and everything. But and then by the time the film actually started, pre-production, on my first day, he said, "I'm really sorry, Josh. I hope you're not disappointed, but you're not going to be doing R2D2 because these guys."
Sorry, Josh.
had been brought in by that point, and I was like, "Who are they?" So, but what he did say was, he said, "But there is this new droid for The Force Awakens," and showed me a little sketch that JJ had done on the back of the post-it note, I think, and then also some concept work that Christian Olsman had done in the States. And that was when I first saw this sphere droid, and suddenly R2 didn't seem so bad a gig after all, actually. It seemed that this sphere droid was going to be a real challenge.
That was the fear moment that you had about how are you going to do this?
Yeah. I mean, Neil was very good. Neil Scanlon was very good. He didn't really tell me how important the character it was, because nobody could read the script. So I think he kept that from me just to keep my nerves at bay. But I then just started to think about how we could possibly make the sphere work on set with a head on top, get it rolling around like the droid that would become BB-8.
So we, I don't want to just say there was 7 versions we ended up with.
We did think about doing it for real. So first of all, we did think about how would you do a sphere going around, head up balancing on top. There's a number of ways of doing it. You can either have a little robot on top that balances, or a pendulum, or like a hamstring cage. But actually for filming, you need something bulletproof, precise, gets it every time. So in fact, we came up with, I think, sort of 4 main versions, but 7 versions in the end.
4 that were operational and were performable, let's say.
Yeah. So one of the, talk about the puppets?
Yeah.
Well, one of the first things I did, maybe Matt, while I'm demonstrating it.
Yeah,
You have something here for us to see.
Yeah, this is the very first BB-8 that was ever built, and it's built by Josh.
Has anyone ever seen this before? Is this the first time you've shown this out in public?
Oh yeah, this is some of my finest work. I get excited.
But it's such a great glimpse into the creative process and the technical process of how you prove something out, show it to a director. Anyway.
Well, so what it was is there was a lot of concepts about whether it needed more movement, whether the neck needed movement, but no one had ever made a BB-8. So I thought I'll spend half a day, and I stressed it only took half a day, so don't judge me on my skills. But it took half a day making this little thing, which we're going to.
But it is an amazing proof of concept, because originally I wasn't sure how BB-8 was going to move and whether it would be.
Look at that. And you can turn the head and, oh, yeah.
So one of the interesting things here is so they weren't sure whether BB-8 was going to be omnidirectional, which means that he could go in any direction at any time. So he could be facing forward but roll left, for example. But as you can see, the puppet can't. It has an axle through the middle, and it can rock from side to side, move around. And so we quickly decided that BB-8 has sides. He has no front and back because he can spin his head all the way around and head in the other direction. But he's not omnidirectional, so he can't just roll sideways, or he has to do a turn to go in a different direction. And this was one of the moments when they realised that actually you can get a lot of character out of that, just having that roll in the axle.
So this was probably, I'm assuming, would be part of the huge conversation about the level of expression required in the script for BB-8. Because I think about R2D2, you know, R2D2 is an incredible marvel, but BB-8 had to have so many moments where he's acting without sound. You know, the voice was such a huge part of R2. What were those discussions like, those creative discussions in the early days?
Well, the first thing we did was we put this into the hands of a skilled puppeteer, not myself.
Right.
And so Brian Herring and Dave Chapman were brought in, and they sort of found some characterisation and did some rehearsal. And then JJ was in on that, and Kathy as well. They still weren't really sure about whether it was going to be a practical robot on set, so we still had to prove ourselves, really. So,
but you're right, just having the head, I'm just skipping forward to come back to that, but having the head on the ball and being able to move the head around independently gives you so much more character than what you can do with R2, because I've tried driving R2 and it's quite tricky trying to make him look happy and sad and all that. And with the head, you can just sort of just dip the head down or whatever and make him perk up, and it's a huge benefit. So this is some puppet images, and this is Giles, which was Josh's assistant.
yeah, the secret weapon that is Giles Hannigan.
And without which nothing would have looked built.
Yeah.
But this was an early test. I think that this was the driven ball, right, Josh?
Yeah.
So the idea was that to aid the puppeteer, we were actually going to have a ball that had a motor in it to help him go across sand. It turned out it wasn't needed, but that was a very, very early test in the back of our workshop in Q stage in Pinewood.
So this is the finished puppet on set in Abu Dhabi. Who's that?
Who's that?
Young
Teresa?
lady on
Hello.
the
So that's the lovely creatures AD, Teresa, who happens to be sat in the front row.
Yeah.
Sorry for embarrassing you.
So with the help of our friends at ILM, you could take BB-8 anywhere on any sand dunes over any terrain really, and Brian really gave that some real subtleties of performance, and also he was able to interact with the actors. He would voice the beeps and boops, and was able to respond directly to the actors. That was a really good thing, actually. It was a great system.
Well, R2 indeed. And I should just say, Teresa usually looks much happier than that.
And there's Brian Herring giving it his best.
And that's a really, so we could change the rig on the puppet. That's an offset rig. It's a really strange rig on that one, where the handles go up and then off to one side. So there's all sorts of ways we could rig the handles to try and get him out of shot. And as you see, not always wearing greens.
So there was no need to paint that out at all, just because of the angle of the setup?
It still painted something out, but they would always try and get him as clean as possible,
right,
or not crossing too many people. And the reason why they use grey sometimes, and you'll notice that the grey stuff is next to BB-8 is so that it doesn't reflect into the ball. So if you put green on there, you get a green reflection on the ball. So they go grey and then green usually.
Very, very cool.
But one big problem with BB-8 is that he rolls on his own body, and so we knew that was going to be, how do you make something? First of all, how do you make a sphere? Spheres are difficult. Then how do you make something that's going to last for a 4-month shoot, going over hot sand, over
in the desert.
The desert. It was a real challenge. So we ended up using lots of really quite advanced materials that wouldn't fade in the Abu Dhabi sunlight, that would take the wear resistance. It was an incredibly exhaustive process. There's Serena, who was another hero of the BB-8 build, and she would lay in all the colours so that as it wore out, It would just go through to other layers of orange. So that, I mean, you may even just be able to spot as the film goes on the wear getting into BB-8. But he needs a retread, so every film we give him a full retread. This whole process happens again, and that's to all 7 BB-8s that we have. So there's quite a big team of people just keeping him running, keeping him rolling.
How much time did you have between your first day and the very beginning of pre-production? What was that period like? Can you describe for people?
Well, we had 2 months of R&D where we figured out what to make, and then we had 3 months, about 3 months, 3 or 4 months of actually making. So that's pretty short. I would have liked much longer.
And how many? Obviously, you had different versions, right?
Yeah.
You know, but how many of each were required? You know, in terms of backups and things like that.
Well, we had 7 in total, and we had panels on standby to be swapped in. So we made it modular so that everything could be replaced, and also
Came with a kit of parts then.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Great. So that's casting the mold there.
Yeah, there's Kenny, and then Kenny Wilson was the head mold maker, and he's just pulling out a mold of stunt BB-8. So we thought, not only do we need these practical ones, but we need a stunt version. Actually, that was never used once. So we made that, but it was never used because I think BB-8 does its own stunts. So
even when John Boyega is falling into the that's one of the.
Yeah, so JJ, we'd say, can we use the stunt one? And JJ would be like, no, let's use the real one. So despite all our best efforts, he always used the real ones. So
Which shot did you ask about, the John Boyega?
John Boyega at one point had to do it, and he falls back.
So we had a special one for that. That was the Carrier.
Yeah.
We had a lightweight version called the Carrier.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Otherwise, it would have crushed him.
So they just cut in the big metal clank sound effect afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Great. So what is the wiggler? I see you have this slide here called the wiggler.
So the head of visual effects, Roger Guyat, we told him pretty much what we were going to build. We wanted to build some remote control versions. We wanted some puppet versions done. But he suggested that we had a version that could be shot all the way around. No ILM cleanup needed, but perhaps didn't roll away. And so we've tried to give it another name, but you never choose your own nicknames. And because it wiggled on the spot, it got nicknamed the Wiggler. And so it was just a ball that was pivoted at the base, with motors inside, and then the head on top, which would move around. And what we could do is we could sort of bury the base plate in sand or script in the deck of the Millennium Falcon, and then operate it remotely without any CGI.
And this is one of the more complicated builds that we did, probably the third most complicated, I'd say, of the BB-8s. And we added, as Giles again, we added things to this to make puppeteering easy, for example. So the head obviously moves forwards and backwards and left and right, so does the body, and the body spins, and the head spins. But one of the things we found whilst we were building this and using it was that it's quite hard to keep focus on something with the head. So I built in a feature that whichever way the head is pointing is forwards. So if you spin the head round to 70 degrees and push forwards on the stick, the whole evidence that's renegotiated as the forward position. So wherever he looks, that's always his forwards, which makes puppeteering just much easier.
How many shots do you think in the final did we see this in?
It's quite a few actually. There's quite a few shots.
Yeah, there was a good spread actually. We were really quite pleasantly surprised because all the different versions had an equal spread of shots throughout the movie. So no one particular one. They all found their own strengths. The puppet would be for either rough terrain or where you needed a really good performance. The trikes, maybe more background shots. The Wiggler when it was on the Millennium Falcon. So there was a good spread. We sort of vindicated our choices really.
And you get a really good performance at the Wiggler, and also it was used in the back of the X-Wing. So whenever there's an X-Wing shot and BB-8's doing this in the back, that's the Wiggler.
Great. So it really vindicates your decision to make multiple versions for different problems rather than be in a laboratory trying to actually invent the BB-8.
Yeah, as tempting as it was, and also the other good